Hey everybody, this is Ms. Corey. Welcome to U3-L9, Alexander the Great. Your job, you're going to watch this ed puzzle and answer the questions. Questions I ask you today that are in blue text are just questions that I want you to answer on the ed puzzle itself. Make sure you're following along with your study guide. Answer or write down any important concepts on your study guide that are in red text. If you have questions, certainly email me or come to office hours. I know one of your vocab words is Alexander the Great. I mean, this whole slideshow is pretty much about him. So make sure that you're writing about stuff about him throughout this whole slideshow. All right, so learning targets. Students will be able to follow the influence of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle on one another and Alexander the Great, explain the basics of the Peloponnesian War, explain the rise of the kingdom of Macedonia, explain who King Philip II and Alexander the Great were, and follow the timeline of the Hellenistic age. I know, a lot to go through today. So there are college classes dedicated to just Alexander the Great, and we're going to smash all the information we possibly can into 20-ish minutes. So prepare yourself. There's a lot of information overload. First question, have you heard of Alexander the Great? If so, what do you know about him? Okay, if you haven't, we're going to learn all about him today. So before we get to Alexander, uh, just a little bit of a review, and we have to talk about two other wars that happened before we get to Alexander the Great. So last time we talked about the Persian Wars, which was from 499 to 449 BCE. And again, we talked about how this was Persia versus Greek city-states. Persia kicked their butts, defeated many of the city-states. Athens was still fighting on. They wanted revenge. They eventually drove out the Persians in 477 BCE. Persia is still the large empire. Okay, so they're still over here in Anatolia. They're still a threat to Greece. And this leads to something called the Peloponnesian War. So the Peloponnesian War, that was from 431 to 404 BCE. And this is a little bit of a change up from the Persian War because now it's not Athens and Sparta versus Persia. Sparta and Persia become allies and they're fighting Athens. Um, so Sparta and Persian becomes allies because Sparta was like, okay, yeah, we can't defeat the Persians, so let's become friends. So Athens builds a giant wall around the territory and stations its navy ships around the coast. Remember, their navy is like overpowered. And they defended Athens actually for 27 years until we'll get there in just a second. So again, the Persian Empire was very, very rich, right? They had a lot of land and they had a lot of natural resources. So they gave funding to the Spartan navy. And Sparta engineered an even better ship than the Athens. So Sparta pretty much whooped Athens' butts at their own game, which was having really strong navy ships. And Athens eventually surrendered to Persia in 404 B. Yeah, oof, ouch, that would hurt to be an Athenian at that time. So again, we have the map all the way here from India, and then all the way over here to Greece, and they go a little bit into Europe too, and then all the way down here into Egypt. We'll talk about Egypt too, so just hold tight. All right, so here we go, Egypt. In about 387 BCE, the Persian Empire was getting too big to rule. So the Egyptian people started rebelling against their Persian rulers. And the Persian rulers were like, hey, we got to stop Egypt. So let's send like all of our troops to Egypt to stop the rebellion. But there's a problem with that. So if the military focused in on Egypt, where is the military not at? Well, they're not a lot of places, but specifically, they're not in Greece anymore. So the Greek powers are going to rise again, but this time it's going to be kind of an underdog. So just north of where Athens and Sparta is this little kingdom. It's called Macedonia. It is in northern Greece, and it gained military strength while Persia was in Egypt. And Greek city states had previously not seen Macedonians as Greeks. Okay, they're like, no, you're too far north, you're too different from us, you're not a Greek. But King Philip of Macedonia, who ruled from 359 to 336, really sought to change that. He wanted to fit in with the cool Greek cool kids. I want to be Greek too, just like Athens and Sparta. All right, so King Philip. He is a military superpower. He created the new Macedonian phalanx, and it had less armor and longer spears. So you can see a picture here. So my next question for you is this: how would less armor and longer spears help his soldiers? Yeah, it is way easier to move with less weight. That means that the army can travel quicker. Longer spears means less close range combat. So if someone's coming in with a sword, right, they're totally going to get poked by the Macedonian phalanx. Um, and also, he had a mix of cavalry, which is soldiers on horses, and infantry, which is soldiers on foot troops. So he had a good mix of that instead of having just one or the other. He also invented things called catapults that would then smash walls by hurtling giant rocks. So again, here's the Macedonian phalanx. So you can see these are like gigantic spears, a little less armor. Um, but again, with the gigantic spears, they don't need to arm themselves as much. Here's a catapult. Yeah, would not be great to be hit by a catapult rock. So here's the difference between the Greek. You can see here with the shorter spears, more armor, bigger shields. Macedonian, less shields, longer spears. All right, so King Philip. He drove out the Persians from Greece. He also united Greek states under the Confederacy of Corinth. So that meant like all the Greek states, like the city states, like Athens and Sparta, and all the other ones we kind of talked about, kind of come together and are like, okay, yeah, we'll be friends now. He was unfortunately assassinated in 336 BCE, and that's when his son Alexander comes into power. So, is it cool with you that I just call Alexander the Great Alex from now on? My slide's face is very precious to me. So you better said yes, because that's what I'm doing. You don't have a choice. But before we talk about Alexander the Great, we got to learn about some philosophers that made Alexander the Great so great. So, way back in 399 BCE Athens, there was this philosopher dude. His name was Socrates. He was alive from 470 to 399 BCE. Uh, a philosopher is someone who studies and seeks to learn the truths and functions of the world. He really liked to hang around with young boys and teaching them philosophy. Like, here's a painting of him doing his thing, I guess. He went on trial too because he was thought to be corrupting the youth as he like taught these young boys. He also didn't believe in the Greek gods, which was like a really big offense. So Socrates argued that he was being framed because some of his students were sons of politicians who wanted to overthrow the Athenian government. He eventually died by actually drinking hemlock, which is a type of poison, which you can probably find like anywhere in a field. That's what hemlock looks like, by the way. In the crowd was a devoted student. His name was Plato. Here's Plato right here. I know. This is Plato in his old age. He was younger when he met Socrates. So he wrote down all of Socrates' teachings. Socrates didn't even write down his own teachings. It was Plato who did that. And Plato filled in Socrates' teaching role when Socrates died. And he taught philosophy to his student, Aristotle. Right, so Aristotle, who was the student of Plato, he lived from 384 to 322 BCE, was the tutor to Alex. He was chosen personally by King Philip, who was Alexander's dad, and he taught Alex politics, logic, poetry, physics, astronomy, zoology, and more. All right, now we'll talk about Alexander the Great. So, he became the king of Macedonia, which included Greece at this point, after his dad was assassinated. His main goal was to take over the Persian Empire. He wanted to revenge against the Persians' invasion of Greece during the Persian Wars. Of course, he was not alive during that time, and neither was his dad. But he still wanted revenge um, because he thought Greek was the best. Why could they lose to the Persians? In 334 BCE, Alex crossed into Anatolia and Mesopotamia, and he totally kicked Persia's butt. And by 330 BCE, he took over all of the Persian territory. So in just those, what was it, 4 short years? 4 years. He went from having this area, like right here, to all of that. Crazy. Yes, all the way here from Macedonia into Anatolia, through the Middle East, and over to the border of India. And don't forget also here in the other part of the Middle East, like Jerusalem, down into Egypt. He had all of that in 4 years. Crazy. So after he took that over, Persian Empire, it's gone. It's dead. We're done with it. Alex does keep former Persian government structures in place. So, next question. Why would Alex not want to change the former Persian government structure? So, a change in a government in a vast area of land would lead to a lot of confusion, not just among the citizens, but a lot among like the political elite themselves. So that really may spark a rebellion. So Alex is like, nah, I'm not touching that. Let's just keep what government structure they have in place, so there's no rebellions. He also married several women from Iran for political ties to the Middle East. So he was smart when it came to his political marriages. So again, he left the Persian government in place, but he did again was taught by a Greek philosopher, so he wanted to spread Greek culture. Um, so remember, his tutor was an Athenian, and his dad loved Greek culture. So Alex just thought this was his destiny to spread Greek culture to all of the world. He created Greek-like cities outside of Greece to spread Greek influence and culture. Alex's spreading of Greek culture is something called Hellenization. And we'll come back to Hellenization in just a moment. Um, but Alex didn't stop at conquering just the Persian Empire. He wanted more. He was kind of greedy with that. He also did military campaigns into Asia, going even further into India than you saw on the map I had 2 slides ago. He would stop at the Indus River. Alex got injured during that campaign, so they had to turn back. On his way back, he stopped in Babylon. That's where, unfortunately, he died in 323. It's really unknown if it was natural or if he was assassinated, but think of this. He was only 32 years old and he ruled all that land. And he did not have any known children, so there was no clear successor to the throne. So again, here's another map. This is what he inherited from his dad, King Philip. This is what he gained, which was all of the Persian Empire, plus some into India. All right, let's talk about the Hellenistic Age. So that is from 323 to 31 BCE. It started with the death of Alex and lasted until the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. I know, crazy. We'll learn more about Augustus Caesar next unit. But it occurred in northern Africa, Western Asia, and southern Europe mostly. It included things like Greek art, Greek literature, libraries, universities, language, government structure, and other things influenced all by Greek culture. Major cities were named and modeled off of Alex, and Athens became a giant museum and tourist destination, just like it is today. Because when you think of like, oh, I'm going to go to Greece, and you're like, oh, you're going to see like all the cool like temples and Acropolis and art and stuff like that. They actually did that over 2,000 years ago. They were already going to Athens like it was some sort of museum city, which it is today. So that's kind of cool. So Alexandria, Egypt. That's probably one of the most famous cities that's named after him. Um, yes, can you guess who the city is named after? I hope you do. It's Alexander the Great. So Alex modeled the city before his death. This was kind of his last big thing that he did. It was located on the western branch of the Nile in the Mediterranean Sea. It was the major city in all of Mediterranean Africa, Europe, and Asia. Like this was the place to be. Like think of it as like the New York City of today, and it had a population of 500,000 people. Crazy. That is crazy if you think about it. Like I think Minneapolis is only like 200,000, so this is even bigger. All right, so Alexandria, Egypt. There's a lot to talk about. Please summarize stuff in your notes. Don't write nothing though. You got to write something, but you don't have to write all of this. Summarize. It's a good skill to learn. So Alexandria, Egypt. It had museums of Greek art and Alexander's history. There was universities studying astronomy, physics, math, music, philosophy, and much more. It had a giant lighthouse that could be seen off the Mediterranean Sea 30 miles away. Here's an artist's rendition of it. It also had a library with hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. And the really cool thing about this library is not only could like scholars go in, it was a public library. Anyone could go in and check out materials. It was not just for the elite. Uh, the Alexandria Library was not burned like it was previously thought to have burned. What really happened to the Alexander Library is that materials were just scattered among the Mediterranean and across the world. The building eventually got neglected and it just was reduced to rubble. Um, I know, like, I think your textbook says it burned down or something like that, but it really didn't. Uh, and also, one of the really cool things is that Jewish people were able to have their own governing bodies too. So it was very tolerant of other religions. All right, so, kind of to wrap this up, Greek influence, Alexander's legacy, and combining of territories would pave the way for the Roman Empire. Dun dun dun. Which is what we will learn about in Unit 4. Woo! Okay, so today we learned about the Peloponnesian War, Macedonia, King Philip, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, acronym SPA, Hellenization, the Hellenistic Age, and Alexandria, Egypt. So next up, you're going to do U3-L10 Ancient Greece video choice. It's there's also after this is an optional but highly recommended Kahoot that you can take before taking the test. I make the Kahoots myself. Again, the Kahoot is optional, but I highly recommend you do it because it's a great study tool. Then you're going to take the Unit 3 test. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have complaints about anything, because this is kind of a longer video, but not that long in the realm of things, you can email me or Mrs. Hinkle or come to one of our office hours. So again, you can email me if you want to learn more questions, email your teacher. My office hours are Mondays from 12 to 1, and Mrs. Hinkle's are from 2 to 3 on Wednesdays. And if you're in my class, do the weekly check-in. I really enjoy responding back to y'all. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Bye.